She was 21 years old. She had no family, no home, no savings. Just a backpack she'd been living out of for 3 months and $10 folded inside the front pocket of her jacket. And with that $10, she bought a house. Not just any house. An abandoned ranger station, deep in the mountains of central Idaho. 14 miles from the nearest paved road, locked away behind a 7,200-foot pass that closed under snow 8 months of the year. The Forest Service called it unsafe. The county had condemned it decades ago. Nobody had walked through that door in over 50 years. But Wren Calloway was not the kind of girl who listened to warnings. She had buried her mother 6 months earlier. She had nothing left to lose. And something she could not explain had been pulling her toward those mountains since she was 8 years old. So she shouldered her pack. She crossed the pass alone. And when she finally pushed open that weathered wooden door, she found exactly what the listing had promised. Dust. Silence. A room frozen in 1971. But she also found something else. Something locked inside a metal cabinet for over half a century. Something that no one, not the Forest Service, not the county, not a single soul still living in that valley knew was there. And what was inside that cabinet was about to rewrite everything she thought she knew about who she was, about where she came from, and about the mother she had just lost. The wind on the pass came at her sideways, cold, wet. The kind of wind that finds the gap between your collar and your skin and goes straight for the bone. Wren Calloway stood at 7,200 feet, snow on her boots, pack on her shoulders, and in her gloved hand, a piece of paper, a receipt. She read it again, just to make sure. Salmon Chalice National Forest, Parcel 47B, sale price $10. Buyer Wren Calloway. Date of purchase April 12th, $10 for a house. She laughed out loud, right there on the pass, with the wind tearing at her jacket and the granite peaks rising sharp on either side, and not one human soul within 10 miles to hear her. She laughed because what else could she do? Because 2 weeks ago, she had been sleeping on a stranger's couch in Coeur d'Alene. Because 3 months ago, she had been sleeping on a bus station bench. Because 6 months ago, she had been holding her mother's hand while her mother stopped breathing. And now she owned a cabin, or she would, in about 6 more miles. If she didn't freeze first, if she didn't slip on the snowfields below the pass and break her ankle and disappear into a country where nobody would find her body until summer, which were both real possibilities. She folded the receipt, tucked it back into the inside pocket of her jacket, right next to the other piece of paper, the one she didn't take out as often. The one that had started all of this. A map. Her mother's map. She shouldered the pack again. 22 pounds, mostly food, a little fuel, 1 sleeping bag, 1 headlamp, 1 battered copy of a book she'd read so many times the spine was held together with duct tape. She started down. 8 years old. That was when it started. She remembered it like a photograph. The kitchen floor was yellow linoleum, cracked at the edges where the wall met the floor. The cabinet under the sink leaked sometimes. There was a stain on the ceiling where the upstairs bathroom had overflowed once, and her mother had cried because they couldn't afford to fix it. But the road atlas. The road atlas was perfect. It was big, heavy, hard cover. The cover had a bald eagle on it, and the words Rand McNally American Road Atlas, 1998 edition. Her mother had bought it at a thrift store for $1.50 when she was pregnant. She used to plan road trips on it, trips she never took. But Wren took them. She would lie on her stomach on that linoleum floor with the atlas open, and she would put her finger on a green space, any green space. The bigger, the better. National forests, state parks, wilderness areas, places without towns, places with names like Frank Church Wilderness and Selway Bitterroot and Pasayton. She would close her eyes, and she would imagine herself there, not in a tent, not on a hike, living, like a person who lived there, like a person who knew the trails and the streams and where the elk bedded down at noon, like a person who belonged to the land instead of just visiting it. Her mother would come into the kitchen, see her on the floor, smile. "What are you doing, baby?" "Looking at where I'm gonna live someday." Her mother would shake her head, laugh a little. The way you laugh at a child who says she's going to be a princess, or an astronaut, or a fairy. "Okay, baby, you let me know when you get there." Marianne Calloway was a kind woman, a tired woman, a woman who had been left by her husband when Wren was 4 and who had never quite gotten over it. She kept books for a feed store outside of Spokane, 40 hours a week, sometimes more. She came home smelling like grain dust and cigarette smoke from the men who hung around the loading dock. She loved her daughter, fiercely, quietly, the way some women love. But she didn't understand her. How could she? Marianne had never wanted mountains. Marianne had wanted a normal life, a husband who stayed, a house with a yard, a daughter who would grow up and go to college and come home for Christmas. What she got instead was a husband who left, a rented house with a bad roof, and a daughter who at the age of 14 started disappearing into the wilderness alone for 3 days at a time. The first time Wren did it, Marianne almost called the police, but Wren came back, tired, dirty, filthy, with pine needles in her hair and a smile on her face like she had just discovered fire. And Marianne realized something she didn't say out loud for years. You couldn't stop a girl like that. You could only love her and hope she came back. By 17, Wren had hiked over 800 miles of trail, mostly alone, mostly off-trail. She knew how to filter water. She knew how to start a fire in the rain. She knew which berries would feed you, and which would kill you, and which would just give you a stomachache for a day and a half. She had read every Jack London story by the time she was 12. She kept a copy of Walden in her backpack, though she never actually finished it, because Thoreau, she decided, was a little too pleased with himself. She wanted to be like the women in the books she read. Mary Austin, Annie Dillard, women who walked into hard country and stayed. Women who didn't apologize for what they wanted. She wanted a place. Just one place. That belonged to her. The diagnosis came in late January. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. already in the liver, already in the lymph nodes. The doctor said 6 months. He was being generous. Marianne lasted 6 weeks. Wren remembered the hospital room, the one window, the view of a parking garage, the way the fluorescent lights buzzed when nobody was talking, the way her mother's hand felt at the very end. Light, cold, like a leaf you find on the porch in November. She remembered the funeral. 12 people, mostly co-workers from the feed store. A pastor who had never met Marianne and called her Marlene twice during the service. A casserole brought by a neighbor who had never spoken to them in 11 years. She remembered going home, walking into the house she had grown up in, and realizing she didn't have a home anymore. The rental was in her mother's name. The car was in her mother's name. The little bit of savings had been eaten by medical bills 6 weeks ago. Wren was 19 years old. She was an adult, legally. Technically. She had $412 in a checking account, a backpack, her mother's old wool sleeping bag, and a road atlas with a bald eagle on the cover. She walked out of that house on a cold morning in March. She did not look back, because if she looked back, she knew she would not be able to keep walking. For 2 years, she drifted. She picked apples in Wenatchee for a season, $11 an hour, slept in a barracks with 20 other women. Most of them spoke Spanish and treated her like a little sister. They taught her how to braid her hair so it wouldn't fall in her face and how to bandage the cuts on her hands when the picking sacks rubbed them raw. She washed dishes at a backpacker hostel in Seattle in exchange for a bunk. The bunk was a top bunk in a room with 7 other people. One of them snored like a freight train. One of them coughed all night. One of them was a German woman in her 50s who had walked the Pacific Crest Trail twice and who told Wren stories every night until they both fell asleep. She did trail crew work for the Forest Service one summer in the Cascades. That summer was the closest she had ever come to feeling alive. Long days swinging a Pulaski axe, building water bars on muddy trails, sleeping in a tent at a base camp 3 miles from the nearest road, eating dehydrated chili out of a foil pouch with a plastic spoon, watching the stars come out one by one above the ridge. The pay was $11 an hour. She would have done it for free, but the seasonal work ended, the way seasonal work always does. And by the time she was 21, she had been couch surfing and bus riding and hostel bed rotating for almost 2 years. And she was tired. So tired. She wanted to put her pack down. Not in an apartment. Not in a city. Not somewhere with a lease and a credit check and a security deposit she couldn't afford. She wanted somewhere remote. Somewhere difficult. Somewhere nobody else wanted, because the things nobody wanted were the only things she could ever afford. The library in Coeur d'Alene smelled like old carpet and warm photocopiers. It was February, snowing outside. Wren had walked there in her wet boots and was sitting at one of the public computers with her gloves drying on the radiator behind her. She was scrolling through Forest Service surplus property pages. She did this sometimes, the way some people scroll through real estate listings for houses they will never buy. Cabins in Montana, old fire lookouts in Oregon, decommissioned ranger outposts in places she had only seen on maps. It was a kind of dreaming. cheaper than a movie ticket, warmer than the bus station. And then she saw it. District Ranger Station, Salmon Chalice National Forest, Central Idaho. Built 1927. Decommissioned 1971. Located on inholding parcel, reverted to county. Asking price $10. She stared at the screen. Then she clicked. The listing had photos, old ones, black and white scanned from a slide. The cabin sat in a clearing of lodgepole pine. Single story, stone chimney, steep green metal roof, a small covered porch, a fire lookout tower visible through the trees behind it. The description was honest, brutal even. 14 miles from nearest paved road. 8 miles closed to vehicles October to June. Final 6 miles foot trail only over 7 200-foot pass. No electricity. No water. No septic. No phone. Cabin condition poor. Building has been condemned and is sold as is. Buyer assumes all liability. $10. Wren read the description 3 times. Then she opened a new tab, pulled up the topographic map. She found the parcel, a small blue square in the middle of a sea of green. She traced the trails. She measured the distances. She found where the creeks ran, where the ridges formed natural windbreaks, where the south-facing slopes would catch the most winter sun. It was perfect, which was when she remembered the box she had carried for 2 years, the box of her mother's things, the few things she had been able to keep after the rental was cleaned out, a photo album, a small jewelry box, a handful of letters tied with a ribbon, and one folded map. She had found it in the bottom of her mother's dresser the day she left the house for the last time. An old USGS topographic map of central Idaho. The paper was soft with age. The folds had started to tear. She had assumed it was just one of her mother's old road trip maps, the trips she had never taken. She had folded it back up and put it in the box and not looked at it again. But now, sitting at that library computer, with the listing on the screen, Wren had a feeling she could not explain. She walked back to the bus station that night through the snow. She was sleeping in a hostel that week, a $4 bed in a shared room. Her box of her mother's things was under the bunk. She knelt down, pulled out the box, opened it. The map was on top. She unfolded it, slowly. The paper was Idaho, central Idaho, Salmon Chalice country. She knew that section of the world by heart now. She had been studying it for 2 weeks, but she had never seen this exact map before. And there, in the middle of the parcel, right where the cabin would be, a circle, hand-drawn, in red pen, around the exact same square of land. Wren sat back on her heels on the dirty hostel floor, the map open on her lap, her hands cold for a reason that had nothing to do with the snow outside. Her mother had marked this place. Her mother, who had never been to Idaho, as far as Wren knew. Her mother, who had spent her entire adult life within 30 miles of Spokane. Her mother, who hated camping, who had never owned a tent, who had told Wren 1,000 times that she didn't understand the wilderness and didn't want to understand it. Her mother had circled this exact piece of ground in red pen on a map she had kept in her dresser for 20 years. Why? Why would she? She wouldn't. Unless. But there was no unless. Wren's mother was dead. Her mother was dead, and there was no one left to ask. No relatives. No old friends. No one. Marianne Calloway had been an only child. Both her parents had died before Wren was born. There had never been any extended family. There had never been any answers about anything. Marianne had simply existed. A quiet woman raising a quiet daughter in a quiet house, with a circled map in her dresser drawer that nobody knew about. Until now. Wren folded the map again, carefully, along the original creases. She did not sleep that night. She lay in her top bunk, listening to the heating vent rattle and the snowplow scrape down the street outside. And she thought about her mother. And she thought about the cabin. And she thought about how some things in life are too coincidental to be coincidence. By morning, she had decided. She walked it back to the library at 9 a.m. She paid the listing fee with a $20 bill and got a 10 in change. She filled out the paperwork on the public computer. She mailed it from the post office on Sherman Avenue with the last of her cash for postage. 6 weeks later, a Forest Service envelope arrived at the hostel where she was paying weekly rent. Inside was a deed, a receipt, and a hand-drawn map showing the access trail from the trailhead to the cabin. The deed was in her name. She owned a house. She left for Idaho 4 days later. The bus to Stanley got her there at noon on a Wednesday. The town was small, smaller than she had pictured. One main street, a general store, a gas station, a diner with a hand-painted sign that read, Brennan's, hot food, always, a bookstore the size of a closet, a post office that was open 3 days a week. The bus driver dropped her at the gas station, looked at her pack, looked at her boots, said one word. Where? She told him. He raised his eyebrows, whistled. Long walk. I know. You got someone meeting you up there? No. He looked at her again, the way men sometimes look at young women who are about to do something dangerous. The look that wants to say something, that doesn't quite know how. Be careful, he said. I will. She started walking. The trailhead was 4 miles outside of town. She made it by mid-afternoon. There was a Forest Service ranger sitting in a green pickup at the trailhead eating a sandwich. He watched her come up the road with her pack and her trekking poles and her wool hat pulled down over her ears. He rolled down the window. You hiking in? Yes, sir. How far? All the way to 47B. He stopped chewing. Set the sandwich down. That cabin's been closed for 50 years. Not anymore. I bought it. He looked at her for a long moment, the way the bus driver had, with something he couldn't quite say. Then he looked at her gear, her boots, the way she stood under the weight of her pack. Easy, balanced, like someone who had been carrying packs for years. He nodded, slowly. Snow still on the pass. South-facing trail should be clear if you take it slow. Watch the switchbacks below the saddle. There's still ice in the shadows. Thank you. You got a permit. It's my land now. Do I need one?" He smiled then, just barely, the corner of his mouth. "No, miss. I guess you don't." She took the first 8 miles in one long afternoon. The forest road climbed gradually, switchbacking through stands of lodgepole pine and aspen. The aspens were just starting to bud, their bark white as bones, their bare branches making lace patterns against the sky. She crossed 2 creeks on simple log bridges. At the bridges, she stopped to filter water and rest her shoulders. She passed an old burn from a fire decades earlier. The dead trees standing silver gray, fresh green coming up around their bases. New life inside the death of the old. She stopped to look at it for a long time. She thought about her mother. She thought about the circled map. She camped that night at the base of the pass, in a small flat clearing beside a frozen creek. She ate a cold dinner, cheese and dried apricots and a piece of bread she had bought at the general store in Stanley that morning. She watched the stars come out one by one above the ridge. It was cold, below freezing by midnight, but Wren was used to cold. She wore her thermal layers inside her sleeping bag, put her water bottle in the bag with her so it wouldn't freeze, and slept the deep, heavy sleep of a body that has been working all day. When she woke up at dawn, frost was thick on the outside of her sleeping bag. Her breath made clouds in the cold air. The eastern sky was the color of pale rose behind the dark teeth of the granite ridge above her. She made coffee on a tiny stove, ate a granola bar, packed her camp, and started up. The trail to the pass was steep, north-facing, patchy with late-season snow in the shaded sections. She kicked steps where she had to, used her poles for balance, stopped twice to drink water and once to eat a handful of nuts. The pass was a narrow gap between 2 granite peaks. The wind always blew there. When she reached it, she stood for a moment in the wind and looked back the way she had come and forward the way she was going. She saw nothing but mountains in either direction. No roads, no buildings, no power lines, no human structures of any kind. Just rock and snow and sky. She felt something break open in her chest. Not painfully, the opposite of painfully. The way a door opens, the way a lock gives. She had been walking toward this place her whole life. She just hadn't known it had a name. She started down. The descent was easier. Long valley of lodgepole and aspen. The aspens just starting to leaf out. The new leaves, the brilliant pale green that aspens get in spring, like 1,000 small lanterns held up against the dark green of the conifers. The trail was gentle here, the slope easier, the footing dry. She made good time. By mid-afternoon, she was walking through subalpine meadows where the snow had melted, and the first wildflowers of the season were appearing. Glacier lilies, spring beauties, pasque flowers in their fuzzy purple-gray clusters. She came around a bend in the trail, and there it was. The cabin sat in a small clearing on a flat shelf of land above a creek, built of dark, stained logs, single story. Steep green metal roof, a small covered porch on the south side, a stone chimney rising from the west wall, 3 windows on the front, 2 on each side, a simple wooden door painted faded brown, A small carved wooden sign above the door, the lettering too weathered to read. Behind the cabin, partially visible through the trees, a tall wooden fire lookout tower, about 60 feet tall, leaning slightly, but still standing. The light was the color of late copper. The lodge poles around the clearing stood tall and straight. A cold breeze came down off the ridge and made the tops of the trees move slowly in unison. A long, slow wave that traveled the length of the clearing and disappeared into the forest beyond. Somewhere in the distance, a raven called. The sound carried impossibly far in the thin mountain air. Wren stood at the edge of the clearing, and she did not move for a long time. This was it. This was the place. This was the place her mother had circled in red pen. The door was locked, but the lock was old, the wood around it soft. When she put her shoulder against the door and pushed firmly, the latch gave with a small splintering sound. The door swung inward. She stepped inside. The first thing she noticed was the smell. Old wood, cold ash, dust. A faint trace of something she couldn't identify. Pine resin, maybe. Or old paper. The smell of a place that had been sealed for a very long time. The second thing she noticed was the light. The afternoon sun came in through the western windows in long copper bars. The dust hung in the air like suspended gold. The whole room glowed with it, as if the cabin had been holding its breath for 50 years and had just exhaled. She set her pack down by the door. The interior was a single large room, rough-cut pine plank floor dark with age, log walls with most of the chinking still intact, open ceiling to the rafters, a small loft at one end accessible by a ladder. A stone fireplace dominated the west wall, its mantel a single rough-cut piece of timber, the hearth made of flat creek stones fitted together. Beside the fireplace stood an old wood cook stove, cast iron, surface rusted, but the firebox intact. There was furniture, left exactly where it had been the day someone had walked out and locked the door. A heavy wooden table in the center of the room with 2 chairs. A simple cot frame against the back wall. The mattress long since gone. A bookshelf along the east wall, empty now but still standing. A small writing desk under one of the front windows. A coat rack by the door with 3 iron hooks. Everything covered in dust. Inches of it. Soft and gray, and in the corner of the room, beside the bookshelf, a metal cabinet, the kind the Forest Service used to issue to its district stations. Gray steel, 4 feet tall, 2 doors with a built-in lock. Government property stamped on the side with a faded inventory number. The lock was rusted but intact. The doors were closed. Wren walked to the cabinet, tried the handle, locked. She looked around the room, the furniture, the walls, the coat rack by the door, and there, hanging from a nail above the door, a small metal ring with 3 keys on it. She lifted it down. The keys were dusty, cold. 2 of them were old skeleton keys. One for the door she had just broken. One for the lock she didn't recognize. The third was a small steel key, the kind that fits a filing cabinet. She took the ring back to the metal cabinet, tried the small steel key in the lock. It turned. She stood there for a moment, her hand on the cabinet door, her heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with the 14 miles of trail behind her. She didn't know what was about to happen, but something she knew was about to happen. She opened the cabinet doors slowly. Inside were maps, hundreds of maps, topographic maps, fire boundary maps, trail maps, hand-drawn route maps. They were folded and stacked on the cabinet shelves, organized by region, each one labeled in pencil with a date and a description. Wren's hands shook as she lifted the first one out, carefully. The paper was soft with age, but intact. Salmon River Drainage, 1934. Original survey. She set it on the table, lifted another. Fire Response Sector 7, 1947. Another. Lookout Tower Sightlines, 1953. These were rare. She knew immediately. The kind of maps that map collectors paid serious money for. Original USGS surveys from the 30s. Hand-corrected fire response maps from the 40s. Route maps from before the modern trail system existed. But it wasn't the maps that made her stop breathing. On the bottom shelf of the cabinet, stacked neatly behind the maps, were canvas bags. 3 of them, each one tied with twine. She lifted the first one out. It was heavy. Heavier than it should have been. She set it on the dusty pine floor and untied the knot. Inside was money. Old paper money. 20s and 50s. Bound in stacks with paper bands. The way banks used to ban money. Each stack labeled with a year. 1962, 1963, 1964. The bands were faded but intact. She opened the second bag. More money. More bands. More years. The third bag was the same. She counted everything sitting on the dusty pine floor of the cabin, with the late afternoon light coming through the western windows and the fire long unlit in the stone fireplace. The bags held, in total, $39,800, old bills, organized by year, from 1958 to 1971. Wren sat back on her heels. She looked at the money. She looked around the cabin. She looked at the cabinet still open, the maps neatly stacked, the empty space at the back where the bags had been. There was something else, behind where the bags had sat. A leather portfolio. She lifted it out, set it on the table, opened it. Inside was a single typed letter on Forest Service letterhead, dated June 1971. To the next person who finds this cabin. My name is Elias Hawthorne. I have served as the district ranger of this station since 1958 when I was 22 years old. For 13 years, this cabin has been my home, and these mountains have been my responsibility. I have kept the trails maintained, the fire roads cleared, and the lookout tower in working order. I have buried the dead from 3 search and rescue operations and helped birth 1 child whose mother miscalculated her trip. I have loved this country with the kind of love that does not require explanation. The Forest Service is closing this station next month as part of a consolidation. They have offered me a desk job in Salmon. I have declined. I am moving to Alaska to take a position on the Tongass. I will not be coming back. Over the years, I have saved a portion of my paycheck in cash every month. and stored it in this cabinet with the maps. I never spent much. The cabin was free. The food was mostly what I caught or grew. I am leaving the money here. I am not leaving it for the Forest Service. I am leaving it for whoever finds this cabin next. Anyone who walks 14 miles to get here and who opens a Forest Service cabinet with the key I left hanging by the door has earned the right to whatever I have left behind. I will trust the mountains to decide who that is, the way I have trusted them for 13 years. Take care of the cabin if you can. The roof is good for another 20 years if you keep the snow off it. The chimney needs repointing. The lookout tower is structurally sound, but the cab needs new windows. Don't climb it in high wind. The west window of the cabin sticks in damp weather. There's a spring 200 feet north behind a large boulder shaped like a turtle. This place taught me everything I know about being alive. I hope it teaches you too. Elias Hawthorne. June 30th, 1971. Wren read the letter twice. Then she folded it, placed it back in the leather portfolio. She looked at the money on the floor, then at the maps in the cabinet, then at the letter on the table. She felt very young and very small, and for the first time in her life, seen. Someone had left this for her. Someone who had never met her. Someone who had been gone for 55 years. And he had trusted that whoever walked through that door had earned the right to be there. She stood up, slowly, walked to the cabin door, stepped out onto the porch. The light had turned, gold to rose. The mountains in the distance had gone violet at their bases. The wind had dropped. The clearing was very quiet. She said it out loud, to no one and everyone. I'm going to take care of it. She went back inside. She would have stopped there. She should have stopped there. The day had been long. The discovery had been overwhelming. She needed to eat. She needed to sleep. But something made her go back to the cabinet. Something made her look one more time. She knelt down again, reached into the cabinet, past the bottom shelf where the canvas bags had been, felt along the back wall. There was something behind or under. Her fingers found an edge, a piece of leather, tucked into the very back. Below the bottom shelf, almost wedged out of sight. She pulled it out. It was a book, a diary, bound in soft brown leather cracked at the spine. A small leather strap held it closed, looped around a tarnished brass button. Wren's hands began to shake. She undid the strap. She opened the cover. On the inside front page, in faded blue ink, written in a careful, looping handwriting that did not belong to Elias Hawthorne, Eleanor Hawthorne, 1963 to 1969. Wren stared at the name. Eleanor Hawthorne, not Elias. A woman. There had been a woman. The letter had not mentioned a woman. She turned the page. The paper was soft, yellowed. The ink faded but legible. The first entry was dated June 14th, 1963. Today is the first day. Elias carried me over the threshold like we were in a city marriage and not a cabin in the middle of nowhere. He said he wanted to do at least one thing the proper way. He has hung my mother's quilt over the bed. He has put a glass jar of wildflowers on the table. He says he loves me. I know he loves me. I am 23 years old, and I am so far from anywhere I have ever known. And I am happy. Wren sat down on the floor. She turned the page, then another, then another. The diary was not long. 6 years compressed into one slim volume. Eleanor had not written every day. Sometimes weeks went by between entries, sometimes months. But she had written. She had written about the cabin, the wildflowers in the meadow, the first time she saw a bear, the way Elias laughed when she mispronounced the names of trees. She had written about the long winters, the way the snow would pile up against the windows, the way they would read aloud to each other by the fire. Dickens, Hardy, Whitman. She had written about being lonely sometimes, about missing her sister in Pocatello, about the days when the silence felt too large. And then, about halfway through, an entry dated April 1967. She is here. She came at 3 in the morning. Elias delivered her himself. We had planned to walk down to Stanley last week, but the snow came early, and the pass was closed. So she was born in this cabin by the light of the kerosene lamp, with her father's hands the first hands to hold her. We named her Marianne, after my mother. She has Elias's eyes. She has my hands. She is so small, so small. I never knew. I never knew it was possible to love something this much. Wren stopped breathing. Marianne. That was her mother's name. Her mother. Marianne Calloway, born April 1967. The exact birthday on her mother's driver's license, the one Wren had kept in her wallet for 2 years now. She turned the page with hands she could no longer feel. There were more entries. About the baby. About teaching her to walk on the cabin floor. About the way she laughed when the wood stove popped. About her first word. Tree. About her second word. Dada. And then, the handwriting changed. It got shakier, smaller. The entries got farther apart. I am sick. I don't know what it is. Elias wants to take me to Salmon, but the snow is too deep. I told him to wait until spring. I am sicker. Elias is so afraid. He is trying not to show me. But I see his eyes. I am afraid too. But I cannot say so. Marianne is 2 years old. She does not understand. Spring will not come fast enough. Marianne sat on my chest today and put her hand on my cheek and said, "Mama." Just like that. "Mama," I cried. She did not understand why I cried. The last entry was dated November 12th, 1969. If I do not survive this winter, and I think I may not, then I want to write something here, just in case. Tell my Marianne I loved her. Tell her she was the best thing I ever did. Tell her I held her every day of her life until I could not lift my arms anymore. And if my Marianne ever has a daughter of her own, tell her too. Tell her this cabin is hers. It was always hers. Bone and blood, this place is hers. It will know her name when she comes. The diary ended there. The remaining pages were blank. Wren sat on the dusty pine floor of the cabin, her mother's diary open on her lap. The light coming through the western windows, now the color of old gold. The whole room very quiet. The whole world very quiet. She understood. All at once, the map in her mother's dresser, the circle in red pen, the mountains pulling at her since she was 8 years old. The cabin had not been a coincidence. The cabin had been waiting. Outside the cabin, the sun touched the western ridge. The clearing fell into shadow. A raven called once from the high pines. And inside the cabin, a young woman sat on the floor, holding a diary written by a grandmother she had never known, about a mother she had never been told the truth about. She did not cry yet. She was not ready to cry yet. She just sat there, in the place that had been waiting for her for 56 years. She did not sleep that night. She lit a fire in the stone fireplace because the temperature dropped fast after sundown, because she needed something to do with her hands, and because the cabin needed a fire. After 55 years of cold, it needed a fire. The wood was right there, behind the cabin. In a half-collapsed shed Elias must have built decades ago. Lodgepole pine, cut and split and stacked, dry as bone. She brought in an armful, crumpled some old newspaper she found in a drawer, struck a match. The flame caught on the first try. The fire grew, cracking and popping, throwing orange light against the dark log walls. The shadows in the cabin began to move. Wren sat on the floor in front of the fire, with the diary open on her knees. She read every entry. She read them again and again, until she could close her eyes and see the handwriting behind her eyelids. She thought about her mother, Marianne Calloway, bookkeeper at a feed store. Quiet woman, tired woman, woman who had never been to Idaho, woman who hated camping, woman who had circled this exact piece of land in red pen on a map she had hidden in her dresser for 2 decades. Marianne Calloway had been born in this cabin. Born in this cabin in April of 1967. By the light of a kerosene lamp, with her father's hands the first hands to hold her, her mother, the same mother Wren had buried 6 months ago, had been the daughter of Eleanor Hawthorne and the daughter of Elias Hawthorne, the man who had written the letter, the man who had left $39,800 in a metal cabinet for whoever the mountains decided to send. He had sent it to his own granddaughter. He just hadn't known. She thought. Wait. She thought. How? How did Marianne survive? If Eleanor died in November 1969, with the snow already deep, and the pass closed, and no way out, how did a 2-year-old child get from this cabin to Spokane? To a family who had no relation to her, to a quiet ranch house on a quiet street, to bookkeeping and feed stores and a husband who would leave when his daughter was 4 years old. How? How does a child cross 55 years of silence? Wren did not know, but she would find out. She slept, finally. Sometime around 4 in the morning, curled up in her sleeping bag on the wood floor in front of the dying fire. The diary tucked under her cheek like a second pillow. She woke up at dawn to a square of pale light on the floor, and the smell of cold ash, and a deep silence that felt like a held breath. She had things to do, because grief is one thing, and questions are another. And questions, she had learned, are easier to walk toward. She made the cabin livable over the next 3 weeks. She scrubbed the floors with a bucket of creek water and a brush she had carried in. She replaced the chinking in the worst gaps in the log walls with a mix of clay and straw she made by hand. She cleaned the cook stove, scraped 50 years of creosote out of the chimney with a length of chain weighted at the bottom, fixed the broken porch boards, rehung the front door so it sat square in its frame. She found the spring, 200 feet north, behind a boulder shaped like a turtle, exactly where the letter said. The water came out of the ground clear and cold and tasted faintly of stone. She filled her water jugs. She found the outhouse, still standing, the seat and walls intact. She climbed the lookout tower one clear afternoon. The ladder was sound, the cab at the top dirty but unbroken. She stood inside the small enclosed space at the top of 60 feet of air, and she looked out at a view that stretched for over 80 miles in every direction. Mountains, forests, rivers, meadows. Not one human structure of any kind in any direction. She stood there for almost an hour without moving. Then she went back down, because there was work to do. The cabin needed a roof inspection. The chimney needed repointing. The bookshelf needed dusting. The mattress on the cot was long since gone. She would need to bring one in. There was so much to do. But every night, after the work was done, after the fire was lit, after the simple dinner of beans and rice eaten by lamplight, she read the diary again. She had memorized parts of it now, the way you memorize the lyrics of a song from your childhood, without trying. She still did not know what had happened to Marianne after Eleanor died. That answer, she knew, was in Stanley, or further. The walk to Stanley took her 2 days the first time. She left at dawn on a Tuesday morning, made the pass by mid-afternoon, camped at the same flat clearing beside the creek, walked the 8 miles of forest road the next morning, got to the trailhead by noon, caught the once-a-week shuttle van into town. Stanley, in late spring, was beautiful, the sawtooths rising sharp behind it, the Salmon River clear and fast through the valley, the town itself one long main street, a handful of buildings, a handful of people who all knew each other, and one diner, Brennan's, hot food, always. Wren walked in just after 1 in the afternoon. The lunch rush was over. The diner was nearly empty. A radio played low behind the counter. Country music, old songs. Loretta Lynn. The woman behind the counter was in her mid-80s, maybe 85, 86, hard to tell. Her hair was the color of iron, pulled back in a low knot. She wore a denim shirt and a clean apron, and a pair of reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Her hands were spotted with age, but steady. Her eyes were sharp. She looked up when Wren came in. She did not speak for a long moment. Then she said, in a voice that came out a little strange, a little tight, "Sit anywhere." Wren took a stool at the counter. The woman set a glass of water in front of her, without being asked. "What can I get you, honey?" "Cheeseburger, fries, chocolate milkshake." "You walked in?" "Yes." "From where?" "From up at 47B. The woman went very still, her hand on the order pad, the pencil hovering. She did not write anything. Then, without looking up, "What's your name, honey?" "Wren Calloway." The pencil dropped. The woman put both hands flat on the counter. She looked at Wren, really looked. Her eyes went over Wren's face, her hair, her hands, her shoulders. The way a person studies a photograph they have not seen in years. And then her eyes filled with tears. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God in heaven." Wren did not know what to say. You look just like her." "Like who?" The woman shook her head, like she could not get the word out. Then she did. "Like Eleanor." Wren felt the room tilt. "You knew her." "I knew her." The woman wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, untied her apron, hung it on a hook behind the counter. "Wait here," she said. She walked to the front door of the diner, turned the sign from open to closed, locked the door. She came back, sat down on the stool next to Wren. "My name is Dottie Brennan. I am 86 years old. I have run this diner for 38 years. And before that, I waited tables in it for almost 30 more. I knew your grandmother. I knew her better than anyone except your grandfather. And I have been waiting for somebody, for anybody, to walk in here who was hers." Wren could not speak. Dottie reached out, took Wren's hand. Her hand was warm, calloused, steady. "Honey, you sit there. I am going to make you that cheeseburger. And then I am going to tell you everything I know." She made the cheeseburger. She made the fries. She made the milkshake. She set them all down in front of Wren, and then sat down next to her with a cup of black coffee and started talking. "Eleanor and I were the same age. We met in 1962. I was already a waitress here. She came in with Elias the day after they got married. They were 22 and 26. They had driven up from Boise on their honeymoon. Elias had taken the ranger station the year before. He brought her up to see it before they made it official, before he carried her up there to live." Dottie took a sip of coffee. "I was the maid of honor at the wedding. Did you know that?" "Of course you didn't. How would you? I am the only person still alive in this town who was at that wedding. Eleanor's parents were already gone. Elias didn't have any family to speak of. It was a small thing. 11 people. Ham sandwiches and a sheet cake. They were so happy." She paused. "They lived up at the cabin for 6 years. Eleanor came down to Stanley once a month for supplies. Sometimes more. She always came in here. We would sit at this counter and drink coffee and talk for hours. About books, about politics, about what she was going to plant in the kitchen garden that summer, about whether she should bob her hair. She had the most beautiful hair, long, dark, like yours. Dottie reached up and touched her own short gray bob, smiled a little. Then in 1967, she came down pregnant. She was so happy. Elias was so happy. Oh, I have never seen a man so happy as Elias was when she was pregnant. He brought her down every 2 weeks until the snow came. He took such care of her. They walked into this diner one day in March, and he was holding her elbow like she was made of glass. Dottie's voice cracked. They didn't make it down for the birth. The pass closed early that April. There was a freak storm. Elias delivered the baby himself. He had taken a Forest Service first aid course. He read every book he could find that summer. He was so afraid. But the baby came healthy. They named her Marianne, after Eleanor's mother. Wren had stopped eating. Then 1.5 years later, Eleanor got sick. We didn't know what it was. Nobody did. She came down to see a doctor in Stanley, but he just gave her tonics. They didn't have the tests. Not in a town this small. By the time Elias got her down to Salmon for a real workup, she had a tumor in her brain. Inoperable. Dottie was crying now, quietly, the tears running down her face. She did not wipe them. They went home, to the cabin. Eleanor wanted to die there. She made Elias promise. She didn't want to die in a hospital. She wanted to die in her own bed, looking at her own mountains, with her own daughter beside her. Wren was crying too. She hadn't noticed when she started. She lasted until November of '69. Elias buried her behind the cabin. There's a flat shelf above the creek. He buried her there himself. Marianne was 2.5. She didn't understand. She kept asking when Mama was coming back. Dottie took a breath, a long one, and then she stopped. And then what? And then, honey, this is the hard part. I want you to listen. I am listening. Elias couldn't take care of her. The diner was very quiet. He fell apart. Honey, he fell completely apart. He couldn't get out of bed. He couldn't feed the child. He couldn't feed himself. Eleanor's sister came out from Pocatello to help. She stayed for a month. She tried. She did her best. But she had 3 children of her own. She couldn't take Marianne home with her. Her husband wouldn't allow it. Times were different. What happened? Eleanor's sister knew a family in Spokane, a childless couple. The husband worked for the railroad. The wife wanted children but couldn't have them. They had been on adoption lists for years. Eleanor's sister called them. They drove out the next week. They took Marianne home with them. The papers were signed in early 1970. Adoption papers. Adoption papers. Honey, Marianne was raised by them. She did not know. She didn't know what? She did not know that she was adopted. She did not know she had a father living. She did not know about Eleanor. She did not know about the cabin. She did not know about any of it. They told her she was theirs. The Callaways. They were good people. They loved her. They raised her right. But they kept the secret. They thought it was kinder. Wren stared at her milkshake. The whipped cream had melted. The straw was still standing straight up in the glass, like a small, useless flag. She felt a thing happening in her chest. Not pain, bigger than pain. Something with no name yet. She didn't know. She didn't know. My mother lived her whole life, not knowing. Honey, my mother died not knowing. Dottie reached out and took her hand again. I know. Honey, I know. Wren's voice came out very small. How do you know all of this? Because Elias came back to himself. About a year after they took her. He came down here one afternoon. He sat at this counter. He cried for 2 hours. He told me everything. He said he had made the worst decision of his life. He said he was going to find her. He said he was going to bring her back. Did he? He went to Spokane in 1971. He found the address. He stood across the street and watched her in the yard. She was 4 years old. She was happy. She was running with a dog. The Callaways were standing on the porch watching her. And Elias decided. He decided he could not take her away from that. He decided she had a life now. He decided she did not need a broken man who lived in a cabin with ghosts. He left her there. He left her there. He came back to Stanley. He stayed at the cabin for 1 more week. He packed up. He took the job in Alaska. He told me the night before he left. He said he could not stay. He said the mountains were full of Eleanor. He said he could not breathe. Dottie paused. He left the money in the cabinet. He left the maps. He left the diary. He locked the door. He gave me one of the keys. He told me, Dottie, if anything ever finds its way back to that cabin, if any of my blood ever walks through that door, you make sure they get fed. You make sure they know they have a place. He said, the mountains will know what to do. She was crying openly now, not bothering to hide it. I have lived in this town for 55 years waiting for someone with Eleanor's face to walk through that door. Honey, I had stopped believing it would ever happen. Wren sat there, the cheeseburger half eaten, the milkshake melted, the fries cold. She felt very young. She felt very old. She felt like her whole life had been a hallway, and someone had just opened a door at the end of it, and the room beyond was full of people she had never met, who had been waiting for her the whole time. He's still alive. He is still alive. Last I heard. He sends me a Christmas card every year from Skagway. Or he did. The last one came in 2023. I haven't gotten one this year yet. I have been worried. He's 90 years old. He is 90 years old, honey. He has been 90 for 2 months. His birthday is March. Wren put her hands flat on the counter. I have a grandfather. You have a grandfather. He is alive. He is alive. He is in Skagway, Alaska. I have his address. I have written it down on a card I have kept in the till for 55 years just in case. Dottie stood up, walked behind the counter, pulled an old wooden box from a shelf, opened it, took out a yellowed index card, brought it back, set it on the counter in front of Wren, in faded blue pen, in a man's handwriting. Elias Hawthorne, P.O. Box 47, Skagway, AK 99840. Wren picked it up. She did not say anything for a long time. Then, Dottie. Yes, honey. My mother had a map. What? She had a map of central Idaho in her dresser, with this exact piece of land circled in red pen. I found it the day she died. I bought the cabin because something pulled me here. I thought it was. I thought it was just the wilderness, the way it always pulls me. But she circled it. She circled it. She knew. Dottie. She knew. Somehow. She knew. Dottie was quiet for a long moment. Honey, maybe she found out. Found out how? I don't know. People find out things sometimes, late in life. The Callaways are gone now. They both passed in the 80s. Maybe she found a paper, a letter, something. Maybe she went looking. We will never know. But she circled it, and she kept it. She did not throw it away. She never told me. She never told you. But, honey, listen. She kept it. She kept it where you would find it. She knew, on some level, that you were the one who would walk back through that door. She knew. Maybe she could not bring herself to walk through it, but she kept the door open for you. Wren put her face in her hands. She cried then, for the first time since the funeral, her shoulders shaking, her breath ragged. 22 months of held grief coming out of her in great racking sobs at the counter of a diner in a town of 116 people in the middle of the Idaho wilderness. Dottie put her arm around her shoulders. She did not say anything. She just held on. Wren stayed in Stanley for 2 nights. Dottie put her up in a spare room above the diner. The room had a single bed and a quilt and a window that looked out at the sawtooths. Dottie made her dinner: pot roast, mashed potatoes, apple pie. The third morning, Wren walked back up to the cabin. She had a lot to think about. She walked the 8 miles of forest road in a steady rhythm. Up over the pass, down the long valley, through the subalpine meadows, the wildflowers more numerous now, the aspens fully leafed out, the world bigger than it had been a week ago. She got back to the cabin at sundown. The clearing looked the same. The cabin looked the same. The lookout tower stood at its slight lean against the dark wall of trees behind it. But everything was different. This was not just a cabin she had bought for $10. This was the cabin where her grandmother had died. The cabin where her mother had been born. The cabin her grandfather had locked one summer day in 1971, with the keys still hanging by the door. This was the cabin where her own blood had begun. She walked to the back of the cabin, past the woodshed, up the small slope to the flat shelf above the creek. There, in the long grass, was a stone, just one stone, set flat into the earth, about the size of a dinner plate. The grass had grown tall around it. Wren pulled the grass back. The stone had been carved, the lettering shallow, half erased by 55 winters, but still legible. Eleanor Hawthorne, 1940 to 1969. The mountains were her home. Wren knelt in the grass. She put her hand on the stone. It was cold. She stayed there a long time, until the sun went down behind the western ridge, until the first stars came out, until the temperature dropped and her hands went numb, and a coyote called somewhere in the timber across the creek. She did not pray. She did not believe in praying. But she said something, out loud, to the grass and the stone and the air. "Hello, Grandma. I'm Wren. I'm your granddaughter. I came home." A breeze moved through the lodge poles. The tops of the trees swayed, slowly, in unison, the way they had on the first day she arrived. A long, slow wave that traveled the length of the clearing and went away into the forest beyond. It might have meant nothing. It probably meant nothing. But Wren took it as an answer. The next morning she started writing the letter. She sat at the small writing desk under the front window with her notebook open and a pen in her hand, and the morning sun coming in through the glass at her left. And she tried to find the words. She started over twice. She crossed out. She started again. "Dear Mr. Hawthorne, my name is Wren Calloway. I am 21 years old. I am writing to you from your cabin." She crossed it out. "Dear Elias, you don't know me, but I think I know you." She crossed that out too. She sat for a long time. Then she just wrote, "Dear Grandfather, I have your name, I have your maps, I have your money. I have your letter. I have Eleanor's diary. I am sitting at the writing desk in the cabin you locked the day you walked away. I bought it for $10. I did not know whose it was. I think I do now. My mother was Marianne Calloway. She was your daughter. She died last fall. She never knew. I think she might have known a little. At the end, she had a map. She had circled this place. But she did not tell me. She did not get the chance. I am her daughter, which makes me yours. I have so many questions. I do not know if you will answer this letter. I do not know if you are still alive. I am writing this in case you are. I am sending it to the address Dottie Brennan kept in her till for 55 years. If you get this, please write back. Wren Calloway, 47B, Stanley, Idaho. She put down the pen. She read it through twice. Then she folded it, put it in an envelope, wrote the address. She walked the 14 miles back to Stanley 2 days later, just to mail the letter, just to put it in Dottie's hands and watched Dottie put it in the outgoing mail bin behind the counter. "How long?" Wren said. "To Skagway. Probably a week. Maybe 10 days. The mail up there is slow." "And how long for him to write back?" "Honey, I don't know. He's an old man. He might. He might not. He might not even still be alive. I haven't heard from him this year." Wren nodded. She knew. She walked back to the cabin. She tried not to count the days. She failed. 3 weeks went by, then 4, then 5. Wren kept busy. She fixed things. She read. She walked the perimeter of her property. She climbed the lookout tower 3 more times. She started a small garden in the cleared patch behind the cabin, where Eleanor's old garden had been. She did not let herself hope. But every 2 weeks she walked the 14 miles to Stanley. Just in case, the 5th time she made the walk. Late June now. The grass tall. The mountain bluebirds back in the meadow. She walked into the diner. Dottie was behind the counter. She looked up. She saw Wren's face. Her own face changed. She held up an envelope. "It came yesterday, honey. Sit down." Wren sat down. The envelope was small, cream-colored. The handwriting on the front shaky but careful. Old man's handwriting, like Wren had imagined it would look. The return address: Elias Hawthorne, P.O. Box 47, Skagway, AK 99840. Her hands shook. She opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The handwriting in pencil. Soft. Slow. "Wren, I have read your letter 4 times. I cannot stop. I do not believe it. Then I read it again, and I do believe it. Then I do not. Then I do. Marianne is gone. I should have come back for her. I have known this for 55 years. I am 90 years old. I am not well. The doctor says I have months, not years. I had made my peace with dying alone in this little house by the sea. I had not made peace with what your letter has told me. I do not know if peace is what I am supposed to feel. I want to see you. Before. Whatever before means. I cannot travel. I am too weak. The boat ride alone would finish me. But if you can come, I will pay your way. I will send a check. I will send whatever is needed. Please, come. I have a granddaughter. I have a granddaughter, and her name is Wren, and she lives in my cabin. Please, come. Elias. Wren put the letter down. She looked at Dottie. She did not need to say anything. Dottie was already nodding. Go, Dottie said. It's a long way. It's a long way, honey. Go. I have to make sure the cabin is okay first. Animals? I have to. I will hike up there once a week. I will check on it. Honey, you have a grandfather. He has months. You go. Wren folded the letter, put it back in the envelope. She put the envelope in her jacket pocket, the same pocket where the deed was, the same pocket where the receipt for $10 was. The same pocket where her mother's red circled map had ridden across the pass with her 2 months ago. Her mother had circled this place because she had known. Somehow, at the end, her mother had not lived long enough to come. But her daughter had, and somewhere in Skagway, Alaska, by the cold gray sea, a 90-year-old man with a few months left was waiting to meet the granddaughter he had never known he had. Wren stood up from the counter, walked out of the diner, out into the bright Stanley afternoon, the sawtooths rising sharp and white against the impossible blue sky. She had a long way to go, but she knew the way. She had always known the way. The journey took her 4 days. Bus from Stanley to Boise, plane from Boise to Seattle, plane from Seattle to Juneau, ferry from Juneau to Skagway. Wren had never been on a plane before. She sat by the window the whole way, forehead pressed to the glass, watching the Idaho mountains give way to the Washington coast, give way to the Alaska panhandle, the world getting bigger, then bigger, then bigger still, mountains rising out of the sea, glaciers carved into the mountains like old scars. She had brought one bag, a small one. Inside it was Eleanor's diary, the receipt for $10, her mother's red circled map, and a clean shirt. That was all she needed. The ferry pulled into Skagway just before sunset on a Thursday in early July. The town was small, smaller than Stanley somehow, tucked into a steep green valley at the head of a long blue inlet. Wooden buildings painted bright colors, a boardwalk along the main street, a few tourists wandering with cameras. Wren walked off the ferry with her bag over her shoulder. She asked the dock worker for directions. He pointed up a side street. Hawthorne. Yeah, he's up on Spring Street. White house. Blue trim. Last one on the left before the road ends. She walked, her boots on the wooden boardwalk, her heart beating in a way she had never felt it beat before. Spring Street climbed gently uphill. She passed houses, gardens with rhubarb and kale and short Alaskan summer flowers, a cat sleeping on a porch, a radio playing somewhere, a child's bicycle leaning against a fence. The last house before the road ended, white paint, blue trim, a small front porch, a wooden chair on the porch. In the chair, a man. He was old, so old, thin. White hair cut very short, a wool blanket over his lap, eyes the color of glacier water, watching her come up the street. He had been watching her, Wren realized. From the moment she had stepped off the ferry, he had been watching the road for hours, maybe days. She stopped at the gate. He stopped breathing. Neither of them spoke. She opened the gate, walked up the path, up the 3 porch steps. She stood in front of him. She did not know what to say. She did not have to. Elias Hawthorne, 90 years old, dying, with a wool blanket over his lap, and tears running silently down a face that had not been touched in 55 years. He raised one shaking hand. Wren took it. "Eleanor," he whispered. "No," she said, gently. "Wren," he nodded. He understood. He had only said it because for one moment, for 1 second, The light had been right, and the face had been the same, and his old heart had reached for the word it had been holding for half a century. Wren, of course. Wren, of course. She knelt down on the porch boards, still holding his hand. "Hi, Grandpa." He started to cry, not the silent kind, the kind that comes from somewhere deep, from a place that has been locked up since 1971. He cried hard. He cried like a man who has finally been given permission to cry. He cried for so long that Wren just held his hand and let him do it. She did not cry. Not yet. She felt very still inside, like a person holding a small bird in cupped hands, trying not to scare it. When he finally stopped, he looked at her face for a long time. "You have her hands," he said. "Eleanor's. Eleanor's, yes, and you have your mother's eyes." Wren swallowed. "Tell me about her," she said. "Please." His house was small. 2 rooms and a kitchen, wood floors that creaked, a view of the inlet from the kitchen window. There was a woman there, a neighbor, Inga. She came in 3 times a day to help. She made him soup. She helped him to the bathroom. She kept his pills organized in a plastic case. Inga made tea. She set it down in front of them. She squeezed Wren's shoulder. And she went home. Wren and Elias sat at his kitchen table. The light came in through the western window, the same way it had come into the cabin 2 months ago, like time had folded over. He talked. He talked for hours. He talked about meeting Eleanor in Boise in 1962. She was a teacher's assistant, 22 years old. She had laughed at his hat. He had thought he had ruined it. She had said no. She had said the hat was fine. She had said his face under the hat was the problem. He had asked her to dinner just to figure out what she meant. They were married 6 months later. He had brought her to the cabin in June of 1963. He talked about the first winter, how she had not known how to chop wood, how she had learned, how the snow had piled 6 feet against the windows, how they had read aloud to each other every night, how Eleanor had said, "Elias, I am happier here than I have ever been anywhere." He talked about Marianne. He talked about the night she was born. The kerosene lamp, his hands shaking, Eleanor saying, "It's okay. Just catch her. Just catch her." He talked about the first 3 years of Marianne's life. She was the funniest child. Wren, you would not believe. She talked to the trees. She named every chipmunk in the woodshed. She had names for them. There were 7 of them, and she had names for all of them. He smiled. The smile cracked something in his face. She called me Dada. She called Eleanor Mama. She called the cabin home. Those were her 3 first words. He stopped. His hand on the teacup shook. "And then your grandmother got sick." Wren waited. "It was a brain tumor. We didn't know until November of '68. By then it was already too late. She had been having headaches for months. She thought it was just the altitude. She thought it was just the long winters. I should have. I should have insisted. I should have made her go to a doctor sooner. I should have. Grandpa, I should have. You did not know. I should have. I should have known. I was her husband. I should have known. Wren reached across the table, took his hand. You loved her. That's what I know. From her diary. You loved her. And she loved you. And she had 3 years with her daughter. Because of you. Because you delivered her in that cabin when she could not get to a hospital. Because you read books out loud by the fire. Because you let her die at home when that's what she wanted. Grandpa, you did everything right except the things no one could have done. He was crying again. I gave away my child. I know. I gave away my child. Wren. I gave her away. I know. How could I? You were broken. You were 20 years younger than you are now. And you had just buried your wife. And you had a 2-year-old who needed a mother. And you didn't have one to give her. Grandpa, I am not here to forgive you. That's not mine to do. I am just here. I just came. Because you are the only piece of her left. And she didn't get to know you. So I am going to know you for her. He put his face in his hands. He cried for a long time. She held on. The next morning she woke up early. She had slept on the small couch in his living room. He had insisted. He had pulled out a quilt. He had said, "This was your grandmother's. She made it the winter of '66. She used to keep it on the cot in the cabin. The quilt smelled like cedar. Wren had slept under it like a child. She made coffee. She made oatmeal. She sat with him while he ate. He ate slowly, 3 bites at a time, then a long pause. There is something I want to show you, he said. Okay. In the back room, the closet, the shelf at the top, behind the box of old shoes, there is a wooden box. Bring it here. She found it. The box was small, pine, hand-built. The corners dovetailed, the lid carved with a simple pattern of mountains and trees. She brought it to the table, set it in front of him. He did not open it right away. He just looked at it, as if he were seeing a face he had not seen in many years. I have not opened this box since 1971. I packed it. I closed the lid. I put it on a high shelf. And I have not been able to open it since. What's in it? Things. Things from before. He pushed the box toward her. You open it. Wren, you should be the one. She lifted the lid. Inside, a folded piece of paper. A small lock of dark baby hair tied with a faded pink ribbon. A pair of tiny hand-knit baby shoes. Cream-colored wool, almost shrunken with age. A black and white photograph of a young woman with long dark hair holding a newborn baby. The woman was smiling, tired, radiant. The baby was wrapped in a quilt Wren recognized, the same quilt that had been over her last night. And underneath all of that, at the very bottom of the box, a sealed envelope. The handwriting on the front was Eleanor's. Wren knew it now, like her own. The envelope was addressed to Marianne's daughter, if she ever has one. From Eleanor. Wren stopped breathing. She picked up the envelope. The paper was old, soft, the seal still intact, the wax cracked but unbroken. Grandpa. I know. How did she? She wrote it the week before she died. She made me promise. She made me swear. She said, Elias, if our daughter ever has a daughter of her own, you will see that this letter reaches her. She said, the blood will know its way back. He paused. I did not believe her. I am not a man who believes in such things, but I kept the letter. I kept it in this box for 56 years because she had asked me to. Wren's hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the envelope. Should I open it? Yes. Wren, it is for you. She broke the seal. The paper inside was a single sheet, folded twice. The handwriting careful, but unsteady. The hand of a woman who knew she was dying, writing slowly, choosing every word. To my granddaughter, I do not know your name. I do not know if you exist. I am writing this letter on faith, the way some people pray. I am 29 years old and I am dying. I have a daughter named Marianne who is 2 years old and who will not remember me. I have a husband named Elias who will not be the same after I am gone. I am writing this because I cannot bear the thought that everything I am will simply vanish. That my daughter will grow up without me. That her children will never know I existed. That the line that runs through me will be cut, and I will be forgotten. So I am writing to you, across whatever years separate us. I am sending you this letter the way you put a message in a bottle, hoping the tide carries it where it is supposed to go. If you are reading this, then you exist. You are real. My daughter Marianne grew up. She had a child. And somehow, by some path I cannot see from where I sit, that child has come back to the cabin, or to your grandfather, and you are reading my words. I want to tell you this. I loved your grandfather. I loved him so much I sometimes thought my chest would not hold it. I loved your mother. I held her every day of her life, even on the days when I could not lift her. I held her with my eyes. I held her with my voice. I held her with everything I had left. And I love you. I love you and I have not even met you. I love you the way the mountains love everything that walks across them, without needing to know their names, without needing them to come back. I love you because you are the proof that the love I started here did not stop. Listen to me, child. Whatever your name is, whoever you have become, whatever you have lost, you are not alone. You have never been alone. The cabin is yours. It was always yours. It has been waiting for you. It will know your name when you walk through the door. Be kind to your grandfather if he is still living. He is a better man than he believes he is. He will need you to know this. He will not be able to say it himself. Take care of the place. The water comes from the spring behind the turtle rock. The chimney needs cleaning every spring. The lookout tower is sound, but the cab needs work. Don't climb it in the wind. Plant tomatoes on the south side of the cabin. Marigolds keep the deer out of the lettuce. I am going now. I can feel it. I am running out of time. I am sorry I did not get to know you. I am sorry I did not get to hold you. But I am holding you now. Across all the years. Across all the things that have happened that I cannot see. I am holding you now. Welcome home, my darling. Your grandmother Eleanor Hawthorne, November 1969. Wren read the letter twice. Then she set it on the table. And she cried. Not the way she had cried in the diner. Not the way she had cried at the funeral. The way you cry when something inside you that has been broken for a very long time finally falls all the way apart so it can begin to mend. Elias reached across the table. He did not say anything. He just put his old hand over her young one, and he held on. She stayed in Skagway for 3 months. She had thought she would stay a week, maybe 2. But Elias was so weak, and he wanted so much, and there was so little time. So she stayed. She slept on the couch. She made him meals. She helped him bathe when Inga had her day off. She sat with him in the afternoons and listened to him talk about his life. He told her about his parents, 2 people Wren had never known existed. His father, a forester in Northern California. His mother, a piano teacher. Both gone before Eleanor. He told her about meeting Eleanor. He told her about the cabin years. He told her about Alaska. The 45 years he had spent here after leaving Idaho. The work he had done on the Tongass. The friends he had made. The woman he had almost married in 1986. I couldn't, Wren. She was a good woman. I just could not. Eleanor was still in too much of me. He told her about coming to Spokane to find Marianne. The day across the street. The decision he had made and could not undo. He told her about the box on the shelf. He had not opened it, but he had known where it was. Every day for 56 years. Wren listened. She wrote things down sometimes, in a small notebook. The names of his parents. The year he met Eleanor. The names of streets. The names of the friends in Alaska. Things she would now not have known otherwise. Things that were now part of her, too. She walked into town in the afternoons. She sat on the dock. She watched the cruise ships come and go. She thought about her mother. She thought about Marianne, who had grown up in a quiet ranch house outside Spokane, who had married a man who would leave her, who had raised a daughter alone on a bookkeeper's salary, who had circled a piece of land in Idaho on a map she had hidden in her dresser, who had died at 57 without ever telling her daughter why. Wren did not know, maybe never would, how her mother had found out about the cabin. Maybe she had found a paper, a letter, a document the Callaways had hidden but not destroyed. Maybe she had been told something by someone. At the very end, the not knowing was hard, but Wren had stopped needing to know everything. Some things you just have to accept, as they are, as they came to you. Her mother had circled the place, Her mother had kept the map. Her mother had not destroyed it. That was enough. That had always been enough. Elias died in late September. It was a Tuesday morning. The sky was gray. There was a soft rain on the windows. He had been weak for 3 days. He had stopped eating. He had stopped drinking. Inga and Ren had sat with him in shifts. He died with Ren holding one hand, Inga holding the other. His last words came at 5 in the morning, just before dawn. He looked at Ren, his glacier eyes very clear for one last moment. He said, "She'll be glad." And then he closed his eyes, and his breath went out, and it did not come back. Ren did not let go of his hand for a long time. The funeral was small. 8 people. Inga, 2 old fishing friends from his Tongass days, a pastor from the small Lutheran church Elias had attended, Ren. He had asked to be cremated. He had asked that his ashes be taken back to Idaho. He had asked to be buried beside Eleanor. Ren had promised. She flew home with him in a small wooden box on the seat next to her. The box went in her lap on the bus. The box rode in her pack on the trail. She walked the 14 miles to the cabin in 2 days. The box wrapped carefully in a wool sweater. The handle of her pack adjusted just right, so that nothing would jostle. She arrived at the cabin in early October. The aspens had turned gold. She buried him on a clear afternoon, beside Eleanor, on the flat shelf above the creek. She dug the small hole herself. She placed the box gently. She covered it with the dark mountain earth. She placed a stone at the head. She had carried the stone in from a creek bed lower on the trail. Granite, smooth, the size of a small loaf of bread, the right size for the right grave. She did not carve anything on it. There was no time. There would be time later. She stood there afterward as the sun went down. She did not say anything. She did not need to. The wind came down off the ridge. The lodgepoles swayed. Ren stayed. She spent the winter at the cabin. It was hard. Harder than anything she had ever done. The snow came in November and did not stop. She had to break trail to get firewood from the shed. She had to melt snow for water some weeks when the spring froze. She read every book on the shelf. She wrote in her own journal almost every night. She wrote to Eleanor sometimes, not because she believed Eleanor was reading, but because writing to her was a way of being with her. Across the years, the $10 she had paid for the cabin had bought her something none of those dollars had been intended to buy. It had bought her a name, a grandmother she would never meet, but who had loved her across 56 years, a grandfather who had spent the last weeks of his life being loved by someone who finally knew his story, a mother she now understood. A little. Better than she ever had while her mother was alive. A place to put her pack down in the spring when the pass opened. Ren walked down to Stanley. Dottie burst into tears the moment she came through the door. She had heard about Elias. She had been waiting all winter to see Ren again. She made Ren a cheeseburger and a chocolate milkshake. They sat together at the counter for 3 hours. They talked about everything. And then Ren made a decision. She had $39,800 from the cabinet. She had $11,000 more from selling 6 rare maps to a dealer in Boise that summer. She had no debts. She had no rent. She had a cabin she owned outright. She did not need the money, but she knew what she wanted to do with it. She wanted other young women to find what she had found. Not the money, not the diary, not the family. The cabin, or what the cabin had been, a place to put a pack down. A place far enough from the world that the world stopped fitting inside your head. A place where a young woman with no family and no plan could become someone with a place. She and Dottie talked about it. Then they wrote letters. Then they made phone calls. Then they applied for nonprofit status. It took 18 months. Dottie helped with everything. So did Walter Henriksen, the 84-year-old retired Forest Service man who had worked alongside Elias from 1965 to 1971, and who, when Wren finally met him in his small house in Stanley one afternoon, told her things even Dottie had not known. About Eleanor's laugh, about the way Elias had built Marianne's first crib by hand from a single fallen lodgepole, about the kind of man her grandfather had been. He was the best of us, Wren. He was the best of all of us. The cabin became something. It did not have a fancy name. Wren did not want one. It was just the cabin. 2 young women at a time, 3 months each. Free. They had to apply. They had to want it. They had to be willing to walk 14 miles to get there. Some came, some didn't. The ones who came stayed 3 months, read the books, walked the meadows, climbed the lookout tower, wrote in journals, helped Wren with chores, left changed. Wren got letters from them years later, from all over the country, from women in their 30s, their 40s, their 50s. That summer at the cabin saved my life. That summer at the cabin gave me back to myself. That summer I learned how to be alone without being lonely. Wren kept every letter. She added them to a wooden box on a shelf in the cabin. A different wooden box, but not unlike the one Elias had kept on a high shelf for 56 years. She wrote down everything Eleanor had taught her, everything Elias had told her, everything Dottie remembered, everything Walter knew. She built a small library of family memory in a leather-bound notebook. She did not let it disappear again. Years later, many years later, Wren would sit on the porch of the cabin one summer evening. The light the color of late copper, the lodgepoles swaying slowly in unison, somewhere a raven calling. She would be 40 years old. She would have lived in the cabin for 19 years. Her mother would have been gone for 19 years too. She would think about Eleanor. She would think about her mother. She would think about the women who had passed through the cabin. Hundreds of them now, each one carrying away a small piece of what had been built here. She would think about the way certain places hold love, the way certain doors stay open, the way certain blood finds its way back even when no one expects it to. She had not married. She had not found anyone who fit the shape of the life she had built. She did not mind. Some lives have one shape and some lives have another. But she would think, if a child ever came, or if one of the young women who came through the cabin had a daughter someday, or a granddaughter. Then someone would walk through that door 40 years from now, or 100, and the cabin would still be standing, and the spring would still come out of the ground behind the turtle rock, and the wood would still be in the shed, and the diaries and the letters and the wooden box of stories would still be on the shelf, and the place would know her name, the way it had known Wren's. She would stand up from the porch. She would walk behind the cabin, up the shelf above the creek, to the 2 small graves in the long grass. She would put her hand on Eleanor's stone first, then on Elias's. She would say, out loud, to no one, to everyone, "Thank you." The wind would move through the lodgepoles, a long, slow wave. The kind of answer that does not need words. A young homeless woman bought a cabin for $10 in the mountains of central Idaho. She thought she was buying a roof. She thought she was buying a place to sleep. She was buying a grandmother she had never met. She was buying a grandfather who was waiting for her in a small white house in Skagway, Alaska. She was buying a mother she would finally understand. She was buying a name she had not known belonged to her. She was buying a future for women she had not yet met. $10 bought her a cabin. The cabin gave her back everything else. A story of fiction inspired by the spirit of America's wild places.